I stepped outside my house just in time to see my 16-year-old son pinned face down on the pavement by 3 grown men in fake uniforms, one of them dragging a knife halfway out of his belt like he was deciding whether to use it. They were shouting something about HOA authority and ordering me to back away like I was the one trespassing. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that they had just crossed a line they were never going to walk back from. I'm going to tell you exactly how it got that far, because nothing about this happened all at once. It started quietly, the way these things always do, with rules emails, and a woman who believed power belonged to whoever spoke the loudest. My name is Cole Anderson. I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I didn't move into Ridgewood Pines looking for trouble. I moved here for the opposite reason. I wanted calm. I wanted a place where my son could finish high school without drama, where neighbors waved instead of stared, where weekends meant barbecues and quiet mornings instead of alarms and shouting. After 20 years in the military, chaos was something I was done chasing. My son Ethan was 16 at the time. Good kid. Not perfect, not some made-up angel, but decent. He helped neighbors carry groceries. He mowed lawns for free when someone was sick. Teachers liked him. He'd never been in trouble with the police, never even had detention at school. If you lined up every teenager in our neighborhood and asked which one would cause problems, Ethan would have been at the bottom of that list. But none of that mattered to Melissa Grant. Melissa was the HOA president. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you already know the type. Clipboard always in hand. Sunglasses even when it's cloudy. Emails every week, sometimes every day, about trash cans being out too long, mailbox spacing being off by an inch, porch lights being the wrong color temperature. She spoke in rules and violations the way normal people spoke in sentences. She didn't just run the HOA, she ruled it, or at least she thought she did. The real problem started at the community pool. It was a Saturday afternoon. Hot, loud, kids everywhere. Ethan was there with a couple friends when Melissa's son, about the same age, started running his mouth. Shoving turned into shoving back. No punches, no blood. Just 2 teenagers being idiots for about 30 seconds before a lifeguard yelled and they separated. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Melissa treated it like a felony. The next morning, I opened my front door and found a notice taped to it. Not mailed, not emailed, taped. Big, bold letters at the top, HOA Youth Conduct Violation. Then a line that made me laugh out loud at first, HOA Bylaw 19A Mandatory Disciplinary Hold Pending Review. A disciplinary hold for a pool argument. I actually stood there in my doorway chuckling, thinking someone had to be messing with me. I'd seen HOA nonsense before, but this felt like parody. That laughter didn't last. Over the next few days, the letters kept coming. Warnings, fines, parental negligence, threats of corrective custody. Every one of them signed by Melissa Grant. Every one of them dripping with that same smug certainty, like she'd finally found a way to make herself feel important. I ignored them at first because they weren't real. HOAs don't have the power to detain anyone, let alone a minor. They don't get to invent punishment systems. I figured Melissa was bluffing, throwing paper around and hoping I'd fold. She didn't like being ignored. That's when I started noticing the men. 3 of them. Always together. Boots, black pants, cheap tactical vests with patches that read HOA Enforcement. Radios clipped to their shoulders that never crackled. Belts loaded with gear that looked impressive if you didn't know what you were looking at. They showed up around the neighborhood like they owned it, knocking on doors, harassing people about violations, staring at my house longer than anyone should. I caught one of them watching Ethan ride his bike down the street, eyes locked on him like he was prey. I confronted them once, told them calmly to stay away from my son. One of them smirked and said, "We have authority here." That was the first time I felt something twist in my gut. Still, even then, part of me tried to downplay it. I told myself I was overreacting, that Melissa was bluffing, that these guys were just scare tactics. I'd spent years training my instincts, but I'd also spent years learning how paranoia can creep in if you let it. There was a stretch, just a few days, where I started doubting myself. I wondered if I should just keep my head down. Maybe pull Ethan out of the pool, out of HOA spaces, wait until graduation and move. Maybe fighting back would only make things worse. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late one night, staring at those letters spread out in front of me, asking myself if I was the problem, if my pride was getting in the way of common sense, if I should just let it go. That doubt almost cost us everything, because the day I let my guard down was the day Melissa made her move. I was in the garage when I heard shouting outside, not arguing, panic. I stepped out and saw Ethan surrounded in the street by those three men. Before I could even process what I was seeing, one of them shoved him down. Another dropped a knee between his shoulder blades, pinning him hard enough that I heard the air leave his lungs. The third pulled his jacket back, revealing a knife halfway out of its sheath. "You're being detained under HOA authority," one of them barked. Ethan's voice cracked when he yelled for me. Everything inside me went cold and sharp. I walked forward and told them to release my son. My voice was calm, flat, the kind of calm that comes right before something breaks. The man with the baton laughed and started reciting some nonsense about bylaws and compliance. The knife holder told me to stay back, said it didn't concern me. That was his mistake. I closed the distance faster than any of them expected. The knife holder's hand twitched. I grabbed his wrist, twisted, redirected his balance, and suddenly the knife was skidding uselessly across the pavement while he collapsed in a heap. The second man, the one on Ethan, looked up just in time to take a punch to the ribs that lifted him clean off my son. He hit the ground hard, wheezing. Ethan scrambled behind me, gripping my arm. The baton guy charged, swinging wild, sloppy, fearful. I stepped inside the arc, trapped his arm, and forced the baton into the pavement. He followed it down, hard. The third man tried to rush me from behind. I heard his boots pivoted and used his momentum against him. He went down across the grass and stayed there. By the time it stopped, all three were on the ground, alive, breathing, disarmed. And my son was standing behind me, shaking but safe. Neighbors poured out of their houses. Phones came up. Whispers spread. That's when Melissa arrived. Her SUV screeched to a stop like she was making an entrance on purpose. She jumped out screaming about her officers, about authorized detainment, about bylaws and violations. She waved a stack of papers like they were the Constitution itself. I pointed at the knife still lying in the street. "You sent armed men after my child," I said quietly. She hesitated for half a second, just long enough for fear to flicker across her face. Then she doubled down, threatened expulsion lawsuits, police involvement. The sirens were already coming. When the real officers arrived, the fantasy collapsed fast. They saw the fake uniforms, the weapons, the videos neighbors had already recorded. They saw Ethan's scraped wrists, the dirt on his clothes, the shock still in his eyes. Melissa tried to argue, tried to insist her bylaws gave her authority. The officer looked at her and said, "HOAs don't get to detain minors, ever." That was it. The fake cops were arrested. Charges stacked up: kidnapping, assault, impersonating law enforcement. Melissa followed them into a squad car, still shouting about her position, still insisting she was in charge. Not anymore. I watched the door close behind her and felt something settle inside my chest. Not relief, not triumph, just finality. Later, after the street emptied and the adrenaline wore off, Ethan asked me what would have happened if I hadn't been home. I told him the truth. They would never get that chance again. And that's the lesson. Power doesn't come from titles or paperwork. It comes from knowing when to stand your ground, especially when someone comes for your family.